Hi everyone, good morning and welcome to Unit 1 of the course. So this is going to be a fairly easy unit. We're just basically going to run through the course outline, the assignments, the climate, the expectations, all the details, but it is useful. If we'd met face-to-face, we would have spent the whole morning doing this because it's really a building block for the rest of the course. So take your time, go through this. It's going to be a light morning, but still it's important to do it properly and then you'll be all set up for the afternoon and when we start. So objectives for today, we are going to look at the course objectives. We're going to do a detailed reading of the course outline and offer any clarifications you might need. It's always easier to do that verbally than just to read it. Discussions on objectives. We're also going to talk about the teaching format and expectations, and we will talk about the assessment. And then I'll take any questions remaining, and I can take that at 12 to 12:30 when we do the synchronous recap on Collaborate. So it's important to explore Moodle. You've used Moodle before, but every shell is built by the instructor in a different way. There's an awful lot of things in my Moodle shells because I try to be as exhaustive as I can in terms of giving you all the details. So it's a good half an hour of work, I think, if you've not done so already. So it's good that you work this into this morning and that you take the time to actually explore all the docs and the pages and the clarifications that are present on Moodle. So at this stage, you probably want to pause the video and go and do a good half hour of looking at all the features in Moodle, particularly the top section of Moodle. A use of Collaborate Room. I have filmed a small introduction, which is in Unit 1. So you have a small video that you can, again, pause here and go and watch the video, which is separate, which is listed in the Unit 1. And I have a screen share so you can see the features. And also you can see the features which you might not be able to see now, but you will see if I make you a moderator. And these are the features that you might want to use during your class presentation if you're using Collaborate as opposed to Zoom. So have a look at that, and it's going to be useful. The course I describe in the course outline as being active learning. So what is active learning? And this is going to be an interesting part of the discussion around theory. So important thing to realize right away is that active learning is not actually a theory per se. It's sort of a hybrid term that is becoming more and more relevant and topical at the moment. And it's not because it's not a theory that it doesn't make it interesting. So I still use it because it's a more of a mediatized sort of a word that appeals to the general public, and it has very clear sort of connotations, but it doesn't have the clean delineation of a theory. And actually, if you'll realize when we start talking about it, it's actually it borrows from a lot of theories. Okay, so it's going to be interesting for us in this course in the sense that within active learning, you have a reference to very specific theories of learning. So if we were live in class, I would ask you to do this. I'm not going to ask you to do this on the forum this morning because this is a more didactic part this morning. I'm actually giving explanations. So active learning, if we did this in a class, people would probably talk about role reversal, the fact that the student is more active, and the fact that you are given probably more freedom in your role as a student. Often students will mention inquiry learning, inquiry-based learning. And all these things are true. So in that sense, it really is a mix of different things. There's definitely a strong flavor of constructivism, and if you don't know what that is, well, we're going to talk about it in this course. There's also a strong notion. So constructivism is really basically that's the active role part, right? You're not taking notes, you're not being lectured to, but you have this active role in the learning itself. It also refers to social constructivism, which is slightly different, and there implies a lot of teamwork, a lot of collaboration, a lot of creating of knowledge together. Right, that's what social constructivism, and again, it's a theory we'll see on this course. So this is definitely part of active learning, not just that you're working actively, you're working autonomously, but you're working with others, and we're going to try and incorporate some of that in the course. There's also definitely an element of technology-rich learning, and sometimes the students miss out on that in discussions. But in active learning and the way it's being used in universities, it definitely always implies the use of technology-rich learning, and that is very present. So when I was working with Yale, for example, we had active learning classrooms. So the space itself becomes and the technology becomes a vehicle for this notion of active learning. Active learning classrooms at McGill and elsewhere normally would have not a a screen on the front, but actually 4 screens in the room, so that there's no front to the room. They don't have rows of chairs, but they have hubs. Each hub has controls over screens, so it's not the teacher that controls the classroom, it's the learners that control the classroom. They can project from each hub. And the teacher doesn't have a desk. They actually are sort of facilitating and physically sort of circulating around the room. So the technology and the space end up sort of mirroring your pedagogical instructions, and that's part of active learning as well. So this technologically rich learning. Is also often a part within active learning, a part which is experiential, and we'll look at experiential learning theory in this course too, so it's good to introduce it now. This notion that we go outside the classroom to understand the real world, and then we bring the outside world into the classroom to the extent that we can. And that might be through technological means, it might be through guest speakers, but there's definitely that dimensions within active learning as well. So all of these things are suitable to us. They actually are separate theories that have been sort of imported into active learning, but active learning is a convenient framework to sort of convey your intentions, and those intentions actually are made up of several theories on learning that are included within this big umbrella term. Okay, and we're going to try and do all of that in this course, definitely. All the more because it's virtual now, and so I'm going to try and lean that way and try and include as much as that to the extent that we can within a week. I also use universal design for learning. So you all are interested in inclusion, and you've probably already heard of universal design for learning. So what is universal design for learning? Is I think if you Google it, you're going to get over 2 million hits. There's a lot of material now. So sometimes it's the challenge with UDL is explaining it to people in a nutshell. So in a nutshell, I would say that it's a framework to manage learner diversity that is sustainable because it's looking at systemic change of our pedagogy and our institutions. And it looks to translate what we call the social model of disability. And I hope, and we will see if you have already heard of the social model of disability, which is a theory as well. So that's another one that we're going to explore hopefully in this course. And the social model of disability basically argues that disability is not an inherent feature, it's not a characteristics of people. What the characteristics of people are actually the impairment, or sometimes we call it the embodiment, and that exists, it's a reality. But disability is actually an interactionist concept. So it's this notion that it's not the impairment that's the disability, it's the friction that exists between the embodiment of the person and the way the environment is designed. So if the environment is designed not to accommodate that person, there is friction there, and that's when the person has a perception of disability. So the same person in different environments may or may not have a perception of disability depending on how the environment is designed. That's basically the key argument of the social model of disability. And that's translated into the UDL. So UDL translates the social model of disability because it argues that you as teachers are designers, and that you can design environments and learning experience that disable students, or on the contrary, that remove barriers. And that we have to be conscious and aware of each gesture and action in our teaching, because at each of these conjunctures we have the ability to design inclusively. And how do we design inclusively? By adding flexibility to all of that we do. And so that takes us down to these 3 principles of UDL. So advocates of UDL argue, looking at the brains, there's actually a significant use of neuroscience in the basis for UDL. Looking at the brains, they argue that it's not just students with disabilities, that any learners uses 3 dimensions to learning, and they break it down in terms of input, output, and engagement. So input is the way students receive information. Output is the way they produce message and produce information, or participate, contribute in complete assessment. And engagement is the effective dimension of the learning. It's the way the learners connect to the actual content. And the neuroscientists that have, like David Rose, that have founded UDL, actually show you in the brain where these 3 sort of actions, dimensions take place. Now, because they identify 3 principles, they then say that really, if we want to include diverse learners, we have to actually be as flexible in each of these 3 dimensions, because people are inherently going to be diverse in each of these 3 dimensions. Not just students with disabilities, but any students will be diverse in these 3 dimensions. Therefore, we shouldn't be designing narrowly, we should design widely with as much flexibility as possible. So what does it mean when it comes to resources? So in a course like this, it means, so if we take the three principles, it means in terms of input, that I'm going to give you, rather than give you one source, I'm going to give you several sources. I'm trying to give you sources that vary. Sometimes it'll be video, so they'll vary in complexity, they'll vary in format, they'll vary in length, and they will vary in level of language, hopefully. And then it's for you to pick which one works for you. So it's really important that you understand this, and that's why I put so many caveats, because if you work from a UDL perspective, you want to give students as much diversity as you can in terms of the input, so the information that they get, but that can be overwhelming if they don't understand your intention. So my intention is not to overwhelm you. My intention is to apply your UDL process to everything that I offer in terms of information. So you need choice, and you are the expert on your learning. You know what your strengths are, and you'll be able to pick the source that works for you. So in this course, never feel, oh my God, there's 6 readings. 6 readings means there's one reading there that is probably more appropriate for you. And if we've been given 6, is that you need a choice as to what is relevant to you, to your learning, to your experience, to your context, to your availability, to your ease with the content, and to your also cognitive diversity. There may be things that you find accessible and some that you may find less accessible. So that's important. In terms of output, I'm going to try and give you as much flexibility as we can. When we get to assessment, you will see that in a lot of the assessments, you can actually produce them, actually all of them, apart from the 2000 word paper, can be produced in any format that you wish. And by this, I really mean it. I've been doing this for 10 years. I keep elongating the list because students surprise me by new things. But I used to say podcast, video, PowerPoint with voiceover, animation, media montage, whatever you wish. In the last course I did in the spring in higher education teaching, a student created a song and got a great mark, right? So really, I never stop to be amazed as to the level of excellence that you can obtain when students are given that full range. So use it because it's available for all of your courses. Now, I call this, I'm going to expand a little bit because you're an inclusion specialist, but I call this transitional friction. When students have not been given flexibility and you give them flexibility, often it takes quite a long time for them to get used to that flexibility and start using it. The problem in this course is we only have a week. So grasp it and don't wait till you feel comfortable. Try and make yourself comfortable, because I would rather, in the time that we have, that you produce the assignments that you like producing in alternate format, do them in alternate format. It's going to take light on the burden. It's going to mean that you're going to be able to focus on content rather than writing, and it's probably going to give you higher productivity within the course. So do use it. And the last one is multiple choice or flexibility. Sorry, not multiple choice, multiple means of engagement. So giving you much flexibility as possible in the way you engage effectively with the content. That is going to happen in this course too, because you will see that there's a high degree of curriculum co-creation. So from Wednesday onwards, you are really choosing what you're working on, and you are going to be focusing, again, from a strength-based perspective. You're going to be focusing on what you find relevant, what you find is connected to your practice, and what you want to carry on reading and exploring until the rest of the course. So hopefully that leads to a high degree of engagement and a very intense connection with the subject matter, because you are choosing the subject matter from Wednesday onwards, so for half the week. Okay, and we'll continue talking about UDL because I do a lot of UDL as a consultant and in my practice and in higher ed, and so we can have conversations about this if you want more information. Teaching format and expectations. So this isn't necessarily about philosophy, but you've got a couple of readings as well. So first, on the flipped classroom, as I said, my only way of making this really sustainable and viable for a week was not to ask you to be in front of the computer, but to adopt what is essentially a flipped classroom model. And that's to give you the autonomy to do things in the time that you have within those time frames, without sitting in front of a computer, and then coming back to you for interactive feedback in these half hour. So I think it will work. I've run the course in the last session, the last week, in the same format, and students enjoyed it. Now the flipped classroom inherently has issues too, right? So if you did the flipped classroom all the time, you end up also creating barriers for certain students, and you create accessibility issues for certain students who may not like working on that format. Here, we don't have the issue because it's such a short course, right? It's literally, if we take away the Windows Pro presentation, it's literally, 3.5 days. So I think it's going to work. I don't think we're going to create huge barriers for people who don't like the flipped classroom. But if you are teaching yourself and teaching long term, think that being repetitive with the flipped classroom over long periods of time, and I'm talking weeks and months, gets really, really frustrating for some students. So you shouldn't overuse the flipped classroom. You should always think that, yes, it has great benefits, but it also creates certain very specific barriers for certain students. And then just on the technical side, you see that in each section you have a virtual form. So the question often is at the beginning, why do I have a virtual form? What is that for? So within each unit, in order to create clarity, I don't want a large form where we get lost. So within each unit, anything that we engage in, anything that you are asked to contribute, any questions I have put to you, anything you want to share, and any recap I do, I will do within the form of that unit, right? So that we keep clarity as to the different exchanges that we're having. You will see that at some point I also include media sources. So a big objectives of the course is not just to talk about theory, but to show you a connection between theory and real life and everyday life and everyday sort of issues. Because from experience, I've taught this course a lot. If we stay too conceptual and focus on the readings, you are going to end up thinking and sometimes saying it in your first blog, I've never done theory and I don't know what it is. And what I try to show you through this course is that you are surrounded by theory. Every day you deal with theory. You just have never really looked at it this way. You've never formulated this way, but that it's all around you. It surrounds you and affects a lot of the daily choices that you make. Vice versa, once we go into these sort of big theories and you do the readings, I want you to look back and be able to see that the things that we are discussing are around you, and that in fact you've never had the words for it, but you've used these theories when you've looked at the issues and the events that are happening around you. So in the media sources, that's why they introduce. So at first I do it. I introduce news items and I create a connection between that news item and theories or a theory or theories. And then in one of your assignments, you then have to, it's been modeled to you, so you then have to go and do that. So you are going to look in the news and you're going to introduce a news item to your peers, presumably something you found in an online newspaper or magazine. And then you're going to read the subtext and tell us what theories do you identify, do you see actually appearing in that news item, right? So to create this real world connection. Again, I've told you when we started that in the active learning, there was definitely an element of experiential learning. So that's when it comes in, that it's not just a conceptual approach to theory, but it's a very hands-on experiential approach to theory. And we're bringing it to the real world and bringing the real world into the classroom. Curriculum co-creation. So that again is not a theory, but it's a model of pedagogy. And during the course, we will maybe unpack this one and see what is behind it in terms of theory. What would be the theory that articulates it? I would argue that it's just translation of a theory, and I leave it open for the moment. We'll talk and try and see if you recognize it and you see it once we've started looking at the landscape. But as a practice, just want to talk about it a little bit. Curriculum co-creation, if you've never looked at it, it's something that's very popular in K-12 now and getting very popular in higher ed as well. And it's this notion that instead of making all the decision, there's a benefit to actually giving some of the control over either the content itself, or sometimes it's about assessment, and to give control to the learner. So it has a lot of appeal, it has a lot of benefits, and we'll probably talk about it in this course. In this course, I try to integrate as much curriculum co-creation as I can, and that's why from Wednesday onwards, you make the choices. You identify what you work on. You identify how deep you're going to with that. And the reason why I do curriculum co-creation is because theory is tough, and trying to teach theory didactically, as in sort of sage on the stage, becomes extremely boring extremely quickly. So if there's ever be a course where curriculum co-creation is important, it's this course, because otherwise it'd be absolutely unbearable. I've never tried to teach it in the didactic way. Right away, I switched to curriculum co-creation because really it is just too thick and too, theory is just too dense to listen to someone for 36 hours that's going to talk to you about theory. But I think it works well, and I think when you have control of the reins and you make the decisions, suddenly it becomes much more lively and much more pertinent, much more interesting. Class climate. So we need to talk about this too. So I insist on talking about this in all of my courses. And actually, this too relates to theory. And later on in the course, you'll be able to tell me maybe what's the theory that articulates my desire to do this. But I want to have a discussion around safe space. So what is safe space? Again, if we were face to face, I'd probably spend about 20 minutes opening up discussions and listening to what you have to say. On this instance, because we're doing this virtually and I don't necessarily want to open a forum for this, I am just going to summarize what normally comes up in discussions like this. So people say it's about respect, it's about being listened, it's about understanding that other people have other opinions. So a lot of discussions go around that. Sometimes they go a little beyond, and really, if we had time to exhaust them and get to the bottom of it, we would see that we come back to three main pillars. So I call them the three pillars of safe space. So I'd like to start first of all by saying safe space has been really sort of it got a bad rep basically. Why? Because in 2016, for some reason, Trump and the Republicans in the election started using it as an example of excesses of liberalism, and particularly excessive liberalism in higher education, which he sort of identifies as being one of the adversaries that he has in politics. I think it got a bad rap, and even in Canada, it got a bad rap as a result, just because mostly people, well, they miscited, the Republicans miscited what safe space was, and then generally around people have certain misperceptions about safe space. So it's good to sort of go back, clean it up, and then make sure people understand what it is. And I think when you do that, you realize that it's actually very useful, and that there's actually not that much that's controversial about it. So if we had lots of time and we had time to unpack all these discussions, you would come back to what I call these three pillars of safe space. Three pillars of safe space. The first one, you've heard it, and people normally come out with it right away. It's this notion of respect. So that respect each other, and we respect each other's lived experience, and we respect each other's perspectives. That seems easy, but you really have to dribble that down to all of its sort of repercussions. So obviously, yes, we have an intellectual respect for each other, but it also means a hands-on respect for each other, that we don't cut each other up in discussions. We give each other space to talk. And its extreme sort of logical conclusion, it also means that we are sometimes ready to censor ourselves, because if we're in a class and we're an extrovert and we talk all the time, it means that other people don't have space to talk. So being respectful also means sometimes that we have to limit our desire to express ourselves, just to create opportunities for people who may culturally not be at ease, or maybe just because of their sort of makeup, psychological makeup, and maybe more introverts, or people who feel less confident and need a bit more space before they are willing to put forward an opinion. So that's also part of the respect, right? Creating the space for other people to talk, not just always being centered on our participation. I argue then quickly that you can't have respect. I mean, if you have the respect, it's not sufficient. You actually need the willingness to talk about things that may be a little more sensitive. And obviously, I think the respect is going to feel more comfortable to do that. So it's a precondition of being able to get to that second pillar. But it's not because you have respect that's necessarily enough. You have to go a little further. We individually have to have a willingness to bring to the forefront issues that sometimes are difficult, or heavy, or sensitive to talk about. And we have to do that with vulnerability, that we are feeling so respected that we're actually able to open up about things that in other forums we might not be willing to open up. Now, that's the interesting thing to see, because when safe space is misunderstood, it's seen as a space that refuses to tackle difficult issues. But that's not the case, because when you create that respect, you actually then create a place where people become willing to open up discussions on debates that they probably would not do with their family, they would not do with their coworkers, they would not do with their next door neighbor. But in a course like this, you can, because you've created these boundaries, and you know that space is there and you'll be respected. And also, you understand that by opening up like this with vulnerability, you are bringing to the course discussion something which is conducive to learning. And that's the really important part. We're not just discuss these things to discuss them, we discuss them because they illustrate what we're talking about, and they feed into your learning. Right, so that's very important. And in some of the literature, you will see that now some authors, to try and avoid the bad rep that Republicans have given this, are talking about bold space, not safe space, right? Because you have those ground rules, you can go a lot further than you would in normal class conversations. The third element, which is also important and usually students forget to mention, is confidentiality. And that's really important. It's important that what we share in a vulnerable way to make the course move forward and to create learning, to reach learning outcome, stays there if it is sensitive. We've shared it just for the purpose of moving the conversation along in a course. We've not shared it for you to take home and talk about it to your husband or your boyfriend or your girlfriend or your next door neighbor or your mother. It's there and you leave it there, right? And that's always the rule in any situation where you have confidentiality. You share openly, but you leave, it's not yours to take. So it's very important because we work in extremely small circles, and I'm on, you have to think about the 6 degrees of separation here. I work on the West Coast. I can guarantee you that we would get into conversations very quickly, and we will. Where if we talk about kids, we talk about schools, we talk about universities, you may not mention a name, but very quickly we'll know exactly who we're talking about, and that might be a family, it might be a student, it might be a teacher, it might be a principal, it might be a university prof. And so that that information needs to stay in the classroom. It shouldn't be taken and then shared with other people. Like as I said, very small circle. It's fairly incestuous education. You'd be amazed even across Canada how quickly people know each other and know where they work and know what students they teach. And so that information can lead very quickly to fair degrees of catastrophes and repercussions if we're not careful. So third pillar is confidentiality. So respect each other, willingness to be open and share in a vulnerable way, and also being mindful of confidentiality of anything that's shared in a course. So if you agree with this, I'm going to have a thread in the virtual forum for Unit 1 where it's very symbolic, but I like people to say, I agree, I agree, I agree. So I state, you agree to the 3 principles we've discussed around safe space, and symbolically for everyone to actually put and then their I agree into the thread so that we have this collective understanding. You may think, why is he doing this? You will see that in theory, we will talk about things that are hypersensitive, and we're going to talk about clash between theories where you are going to feel really heated under the collar about what we're talking about. And one theory is going to appeal to you, and that's where this notion of safe space is going to come in, so that these conversations remain civil, conducive to learning, and confidential. Okay, so I hope you agree with that and that you will agree in the virtual forum. Skill questions. I'll let you read that in your own time. But basically, you are supposed to develop your writing throughout the masters. And really, the aim is to get you to this level of being publishable by the end of the masters. Now, most of you are on course 7, course 9, so I don't expect great difficulties. But we do get more and more sort of scrutinous about your writing as you get to the end, because we're very conscious that the end product is to get you to a level where one of your final papers might be at the level of the publishable. So I'm not terribly that strict normally, for example, on APA or on certain sort of nuance of academic writing or certain sort of dimensions of academic writing and tone and things like this. But I will be, because you are at your course 7 and I know one of you at least is in course 9 and one of you is going to thesis. So it is important that we're nearly there, right? So we've got to be a little tighter with everything that affects style, format, things like this. Particularly, we've all got to do the switch now to APA 7. I don't expect you to all get it immediately right. But if I see that you're not switching over to APA 7, I'm probably going to mention to you, I'm going to say this needs to be done, because slowly in the next year, everyone is going to be switching to APA 7, including journals for publications, book. So we can no longer start, continue to copy paste simply references in 6, because at one point that's no longer going to work. The changes are fairly small, but if you don't notice them, then I'm going to highlight them and say you need to be aware of them and make sure that you've changed them. Okay, that wasn't supposed to be there. Sorry, that's a leftover from. That's going to be in your next, next set of units. So apologies for that. I will take that away from the main deck. So course objectives. You will see I've listed them in 2 different ways. So I teach them. I list them for the faculty in a very academic way, but my experience has been that then students relate more if you reframe them into a more sort of practitioner's dimension. So this is what I put up. It's the practitioner's dimension. So these are the 5 course objectives. What is theory and how is it relevant to me as a learner, as a professional? What theories and theorists do I need to explore further within my field? Number three, how do I learn to navigate these complex theoretical landscapes? What are the connection gaps and contradictions between the various theoretical approaches to learning? Four, how do I develop the skills necessary to critique and appraise a theory on learning? And five, how can I collaborate and interact constructively with colleagues and peers who adhere to theoretical positions that is different from mine? So you will see all of these objectives are tightly woven and interwoven into your assessment. And really we'll come back to that. And then in class unit 12, which is not a face-to-face and it's not within the week, it's a standalone sort of unit which I record and you can watch in your own time, either during the weekend, whenever you want. We'll go back to the course objective and I'll tie everything we've done back to these 5 objectives as a wrap up. Next, we have format of assignments. So as I've said, because of my UDL lens, I'll accept assignments in any format that you wish. It still means that, for example, you are going to need to reference. So if you do a PowerPoint, you obviously reference, but if you do a podcast, people ask, well, you do a reference as a page and then you submit your podcast and you submit the reference as an addition. So really, that doesn't stop you from being APA. It doesn't stop you from having a reference and still citing authors, but you can adapt it to whichever format you wish to use, and use that freedom. Again, we've only got a week, so I don't have much time for you to be uncomfortable doing it, because right away, if you're going to use it, you've got to jump in and do it from the start. So assessment, we're going to review the assessment now in details, just so you have a little bit of sort of voiceover and you understand the nuance. All assessment is formative. I accept pre-submission of all assessment if you want some feedback. Now, what you would do if you wanted to do that, you would send me an email. You don't put it in the form for submission. What you do is you send it to me and you say clearly in the title, this is a pre-submission, I'd like some feedback. What I do is I don't mark here. I will look at it and I'll give you a sort of a couple of lines saying either it's okay or it's not okay. And if it's not okay, what's missing, maybe if you've missed something. Now, sometimes students use the pre-submission format and they get to be real perfectionists. If you're up there in the A+, I'm not going to spend time telling you how to refine it. That if you are that performant, then I think you need to use your critical judgment to actually just go, to that perfection that you're looking for. It's not what the purpose of formative assessment for. The formative assessment is there for people who might be at risk of not completing the objectives, or who may have misunderstood something, who feel a bit wobbly with the objective. And that's where it becomes useful, right? To make sure that everyone's on target and you're meeting the objectives and you're not falling below the expectations. If you are already meeting the expectations and you want to excel, it's good. That's good on you. But I don't think you need my assistance to get there. Then you can be your own expert learner and see how you can get to the next step up. What else do I need to tell you about this? Something just slipped my mind. Yes, all the forms. So I always, in all my courses, I do an open submission for assignments. So they don't email them to me. There's no Dropbox. You actually post them in a form, because again, we're going to talk about social constructivism, right? Learning from each other and learning collectively. You learn as much from reading each other's work than you learn from my giving you feedback. So it would be really silly for that to be closed off to you. As you post your assignments into the form, there's a curiosity and you read each other, and that's very healthy. And then you get the feedback from me. So all submission is done on open form, and that includes all the assignments. And I run like this with all my courses. Okay, so here we are. Assignment 1, it's a blog, so it's not very complicated. It's a snapshot, and that can be done submitted at unit 3, so in the morning of Tuesday. It's after you've done unit 2, because unit 2 is going to engage you with a reflection around what is theory. So unit 3 is a snapshot of where you are when you begin the course, and that's what it is. So it can be detailed, personal, structured. You can ask yourself some fairly rich questions, but I'm not expecting you to rely on the content of the course. So that should be done. And I think that assignment should be done for everyone in Unit 3. Because if you don't, then you defeat the purpose. The purpose is not to have you sort of regurgitate things that you've read in the course or done in the course. It's to really get a snapshot of where you are at the beginning. And that's going to be very useful. First of all, because you're structuring your thoughts and you're seeing where you are. Also, because you're sharing with your peers and you all have different experience. Some of you may already have been working with theory quite a bit, some of you not at all. So it's important in that respect. But also, it will serve as a reference point when you're doing your e-portfolio at the end, you can go back and see, okay, that's where I was, that's how I thought, that those were my thoughts and my positioning towards theory, and where am I now, and what has changed. So it's a very, very good marker for you to go back on and actually then assess what it is that's changed within that week. So that's the aim of assignment one. Not complicated, so I'm not going to spend too long on this. Again, this doesn't have to be a text. Can be a vlog, can be a video, can be a podcast, can be a PowerPoint with voiceover, whatever you feel. Number two, and this is an ongoing assignment that you can submit at any point between the midpoint of the course all the way till the end. And again, I think this one is feasible, so you should be able to finish this one during the week and not have to take up time after the course. Identify theory in contemporary educational landscape. So you will see I'm going to model this at the beginning. And then what I want you to do is basically to go into the news. I'm going to put some source for educational news, but it could be also regular news, right? BBC, The Guardian, Huffington Post, a lot of these. And then you are scanning and reading, and you're browsing, and you're looking for something that catches your eye, something you want to share with your peers, and you think you've identified a theory which jumps at you. Now, don't try this in class one, because it's not going to happen. But I guarantee you that by Wednesday morning, you're going to be able to scan the news horizon and say, okay, I see theory here. I see how I can talk about theory with the piece that I've selected. Again, that can be done in a vlog, in a voiceover, in a PowerPoint. It's not about the writing this. It's about your ability, analytical ability to go from the theory we discussed in class back to the real world and show me a connection there to that real world item. Number three is fairly creative, but it's the same principle. I really insist on this because that's why I found students have the most difficulties, and this is how this course is the most helpful. Um, Again, this notion of being able to watch something and to in the real world and to say, okay, this connects to the theories that we've discussed in the class. So you can do this at any point. I said from unit one, well, I didn't change the sections to units. Sorry, sections is when I had 12 weeks. So it would be unit one to unit six. In fact, I think you can actually do this all through the week. You will have different rhythm for this. I'm not that bothered. But basically, I'd like you to watch this film, which is called Most Likely to Succeed. It's a documentary from 2015. Really important film that I've used in many courses. He talks about schooling and schools and how schools need to change. But I'd like you to look at it with this theory sort of positioning and to explain to me explicitly in the film where do different theories that we discuss in class appear. Now, it's not done explicitly. You're going to have to recognize them in the film. They are there. I've done this exercise many, many times. It's a film that is particularly rich in theories on learning because they're looking at how schools should change, but they're not telling you. They're not using theoretical language. They are pretty much using that language in an implicit way, but they're not giving you the word. So it's up to you to make the connections between what we discuss in class and what you see in this film. Now, to watch the film, that's a question you're going to have. So if we'd done this face to face, we had organized. So this is a film that was distributed by the producer's company. It's called Ted Tindersmith, and it was distributed for the first 3 years by his company. And he really was keen on having it shown in educational organizations. So you could organize community events, and they would give you the copyrights to actually have a public screening within a university and things like that. So we've done that at UPI. We did that when I was there in 2016, I think. A couple of times we had public showings of the film. So we have a copy at UPI. It's a DVD. It's sitting there, and I thought I was going to be at UPI with you, and that I was going to borrow the film, and I was going to be able to show you. That's no longer possible. So we have three options at this stage. I have contacted the new distributors because Tindersmith at this stage is no longer distributing. It's distributed a bit more widely, and he's in that producing company has involved a sort of more public distributor, a more mainstream distributor that doesn't deal just with educational institutions, but actually deals with streaming. So he's engaged with that company, and that's how the streaming is done now. And it's still institutional streaming through that. Because you're just 12, we're not going to go for institutional streaming because it's extremely expensive at $395. So what I've written to them, and I'm waiting to hear, and hopefully by Monday I'll know if they would allow me to buy a licensing for a small number for you guys. I'm happy to pay for that if they allow me that. If they say no and there's no option there, then unfortunately you're going to have to pay for the streaming. So I've looked, and in the trailer you will see in the site that there's various options, but I've looked at iTunes, it's about $5.99, and on Vimeo it's $6.99. So I hope that if all fails on Monday, you don't mind that little investment to be able to see the film. I think you're going to enjoy it, so I think it's highly worth it. It really bothers me because I really believe in not having students pay for anything. I never have textbooks to purchase and things like this. So even if it's $6, it does bother me, and I do hope that they give me some sort of compromise on Monday. But if they don't, you're going to have to stream it on your and again, iTunes and Vimeo have it. Be careful because in 2019, a film came out which is called Most Likely to Succeed, which is also a documentary but has nothing to do with it. And I have not watched it, so I don't know what it's about. But this one is Most Likely to Succeed 2015. And the producer is Tinder Smith. But I've given you the trailer at the top of Moodle, so you can look at that if you have any doubts as to what you're purchasing for streaming. Assignment 4, so you're doing a presentation. So by then you will have chosen a theory. So how would that happen? So we will have these windows. I will set up a schedule on the Google Doc. Actually, it won't be a Google. I will do a schedule which will be a Word doc, which will be listed on Moodle at the top of Moodle. But you will see the sections, you will see the windows available, and then you will make a choice as to your theory, and then you will contact me by email and tell me this is what I'm thinking of doing. Is that okay? That enables me to tick them off the box so I can tell the next student no if they are looking at the same thing. And then when I've confirmed with you, I can ask you which slot you want, and then you can schedule yourself in for your presentation. By Wednesday, you will have ideas of theories that you're interested in, I can guarantee you. But I have a backup, so I've run this course for many years, and I have a list of all the theories that students have tended to make presentations on. So if you're really stuck, I will also flash the list and let you have a look and tell you, is there anything here that attracts your attention? But I'm not going to do that at first because usually students are sort of autonomously, spontaneously tend to be drawn to something. And I'd rather do with that than me sort of feeding you options, because I think then your choice is going to be more genuine, authentic, and in line with your own preferences. The presentation is this kind of TED talk, so you aim for 20 minutes and then 10 minutes for questions and interactions with your students. I really insist on the TED talk. I don't want people reading notes. It should be something that you are doing in a fairly ad-lib way. Use PowerPoints if you like, but be wary of not having too long PowerPoints. By then, you should be fairly comfortable with the theory. You know something about it, your peers don't, and so you want to be able to keep it as interactive as possible. And you can even there's question time at the end, but you can make the presentation interactive too. So on the Collaborate, a little video inside the tour, I showed you how to create breakout rooms, how to do polling. So think about all these things, right? It breaks the rhythm, it makes it fun, makes it engaging. And you want your peers to learn about your theory, but you also want them to not fall asleep, right? So you want it to be fun. Assignment 5, which you can, so assignment 4 will be done during the course as well. You'll have that mark definitely. You won't need extra time for that. Assignment 5, it's going to be a follow-up on the presentation. So this one might be after the fact, because if the presentations are Thursday and Friday, unless you complete this on Thursday night or Friday night, you're going to go into the following weekend. But as I said, you have as much flexibility with time as you want. So what I'd like you to do for your assignment 5 is, it's a sort of, again, the active learning thing. So you're not just sitting there listening to your peers. You pick up on the presentation that a peer has done and you take it a little bit further. So your peers are probably going to talk about a theory, and in 20 minutes they're going to talk about the big features and they're going to give you an idea of what it's about. But in this further reflection, I'd like you to really consider, if you're a researcher and you apply this, then what choices would it lead me to in terms of methodology and the way I do research? So, going a little further, methodology, which you've already taken your intro to research course, is directly linked to theory. So it's always weird when we do theory after the fact, because all the methodologies that you've discussed, they are directly flowing from your choice of theory. And by Wednesday, you're going to be comfortable with this, right? If you have this theory, then you have these choices in terms of methodology. So after you listen to your peer making the presentation, you should be able to carry on that reflection further and say, actually, if I were to apply this is what it would look like in practice, right? So this doesn't necessarily have to be long. It's sort of a further analysis push, because the presentation are fairly short, as to what could we do with this. And this could involve, for example, you going and finding a study that is used this theory and then showing the kind of methodological choices that they've done, right? A couple of illustrations that would probably be quite good. And then we're getting towards the end. Assignment 6 is a critical appraisal of the theory that you discussed. So it's a paper that follows your presentation, 15, 20-minute presentation is quite short. The paper is going to go into more details. You have more space, but also you're going to be more critical, which is you're probably going to be able to have a section there about the opportunities and the limitations, the pros and cons of that theory, and that you won't necessarily have time to argue all that in the presentation, but you will have time to do it in the paper. So it's the same exploration, but in much more depth. Obviously, maybe now you're again going to look at studies that have used that theory, and then that's what's going to lead you into exploring the pros and cons. And that is probably going to be done after the week because you will need more time for that, and that's totally fine with me. You can take as long as you need. And I've said it, but as long as if you have holidays plans or whatever, I can mark till mid-August. I'm not that bothered. Assignment 7 is a wrap-up. So it's a short e-portfolio showcasing your theoretical exploration. Why an e-portfolio? And what do I mean by that? It could be a simple WordPress that you create for this purpose. It could be, there's a lot, and I'll have a PowerPoint that gives you those choices. But WordPress, Weebly, Wix, they're all free. So you create a page. Doesn't have to be a very elaborate thing because this can be fairly linear. I don't need lots of pages. You can actually probably do it in just one page. And it's something that stays with you. It's something that's live. It's something that you can continue adding to, something that you could link into your LinkedIn profile and things like this. And it's going to be basically a documentation of everything that you've done. Why? Well, because this course is so highly personalized. By Wednesday, you are all on different trajectory. So you're going to be reading different things. You're going to be completing different form of assessments. You're going to be really digging deep in a very individualized work. So it becomes very difficult at the end to give you an assessment that's standardized across the class because you are not doing standardized work. You are all on your own avenue. What you do in the portfolio, it could include some of the work that you're doing in class, but obviously it's going to include a lot more. I want to see the behind the scene. I want to see what you read. I want to see notes on things that you do. I want to see resources that you're picking up. I want to see the whole extent of your diving into this adventure into theory, right? So everything you're exposing yourself to, document it. So a good advice is probably create your e-portfolio from the very start of the week. Don't leave this till the end. It should be something that follows you in that journey. Literally every night you should be saying, okay, what have I learned today? How can I document this? And creating a structure makes sense, and then adding all of these reflection onto the portfolio. So if you do this regularly, I think it comes alive of its own, and it really documents your journey. So take it seriously from the start. Don't see it as a punctual assessment at the end that you just have to do the night before. See it as something that follows you right through, because that's the aim of that assessment. It's really to showcase your journey through this course. And normally it's really fun. It's fun to look at, and it's really good for you as well from the strength-based sort of approach that you know what you know what you've done, you know what you've read and learned and analyzed, and therefore you're showcasing it. Grading, I know it's always on your mind. By now, you've been in courses for 6th or 7th. I know that you fluctuate between people who are core faculty and people who are sessional instructor. I was in the faculty for 3 years, so I've been involved in conversations around grading for a long time. It's a problem in all universities because we don't standardize grading. I'm pretty much in line with what the dean and the coordinator of graduate studies want in terms of grading, which means that 80 to 90 is meeting expectations. Below 80, you're not failing, but you're definitely missing something. And above 90 is rare, but it's that level of publishable. When you're doing it as well as I could do or a peer could do, it's what the field expects. Now, you're on, course 7 and 9. I expect I'm going to be going over 90 on certain assessments. But it's completely fine to be, an 85 means you're full on, spot on, you're meeting all the expectations. And above 85 is, you're really excelling and you're going over the expectations. So that is my understanding of the course objective UPI. And again, I was working full time, so I'm pretty au fait with that, but I do recognize that you may have been with sessional instructors who are much more lenient than that. What you need to know is that these sessional instructors then take heat because their marking stats are looked at, and that they are not always in line with the objectives of the faculty. So and also inflation of grades is a problem because if we all gave you A pluses all the time, it wouldn't be meaningful anymore for any applications that you do after the masters or something like that. So On this course I don't expect any problem anyway. Usually the marks are fairly high because again, it's that curriculum co-creation piece. I find students are highly engaged in this process. I've never had issues with grading, so they tend to excel and be in the top of the meeting expectations, so between 85 and 90, without problems, unless something goes wrong and you've distracted from your priorities. If there are any remaining questions, try and write them down and then keep them for 12:30 to 1 recap. And it's not 12:30 to 1, so it's a mistake there. It's 12 to 1, 12:30. I'm starting to already confuse you. I'm going to go in the main frame, in main slide deck, and correct that. It's 12 to 12:30 every day. If it brings me back to, there's a course schedule page on Moodle, and if you get mistaken or I say something that contradicts myself and you're not sure, always go to the course schedule, because that's what I refer to back to, and that's what you refer back to, and that's where all our dates and times are in. So there are some readings, and you also are going to find them in the readings page in the unit. These are by no means things that you need to read today, but it may be things that you refer back to when you do your assignments. Again, when I started off, a lot of the philosophy that sort of supports my approach to the course that I described today is based on certain theories. So there's definitely things here that you will be able to use and relate to in the course discussions, and in maybe in some of the expressions that you do. They may not be the same for everyone, which means that not all the readings may be relevant to you, but each unit is going to have the readings that are associated with it, and that's where you go back to find the readings that you need. It doesn't mean that you have to read all of this, right? But it may mean that in your own exploration of your theory, that theory relates, for example, to the flipped classroom, and if that did, then you already have a reference here, for example. It may be that you're interested in the social model, and if the social model is what you're looking at, then UDL is going to be something that you're looking at, and you have a reading here somewhere on UDL. So some of this may become relevant. It's the second one on UDL. Some of this may become relevant at a later stage, and that's where you find it because it relates to this unit, and that's going to be the same format for each unit. So on that note, I will stop now, and I will post this, and you will be all autonomous to do the work on Unit 1. Bye for now.